talking about China and talking about the Indo-Pak trade, one perception here in Pakistan is that though India is one of the larger traders with China, but it does not favor Pakistan's trade ties with India. Your comments on that?
Well, I think the relationship between China and India is something which we should all welcome. These are two economic powers. They have complementarities and they have comparative instincts in the third countries, and that is how the trade takes place. A buoyant economy in India and a buoyant economy in China is something which is in the interest of Pakistan. Pakistan should benefit from being located in strategically between these two economic powers. We do not profess that we will always have trade surplus either with China or India. That's not the case. But our economy will benefit by a better relations with China. So my argument is that despite our political differences with India, we should try to create constituencies through the economic ties which will ultimately lead to an amicable solution of the political problems. That, I think, is what is needed right now. Rather than raise the temperature.
Dr. Hussain, I'm afraid we're running out of time. I'd like to go back to Washington. Raza, I believe you have a question for your guests. I know that we are running out of time, so over to you.
Yeah, just a few minutes left. Dr. Anderson, if you want to respond.
I want a quick statement. The last comment had, to be quite frank, I don't want to be disrespectful, but it was kind of unreal and sort of dismissing the security aspect and the role of the Pakistan military from what we know and what everyone knows about it. But that said, the issue of security is important in Afghanistan because you're not going to have trade links with Central Asia to India and through to Pakistan unless there is a security situation that's much improved in Afghanistan. Pakistan has to do something about that. It has a role. The Taliban, which is what the problem is, we're really talking about in Afghanistan, not an all Afghanistan problem. We're talking about a Pashtun issue because it's the Pashtuns who support the Taliban. Now, not all Pashtuns are Taliban, but almost all Taliban are Pashtun. And they have safe havens in Pakistan. And until those safe havens are closed down, and I know the military has often said they can't do it, I really don't understand why they can't do it. They can do it. We have instances in the past, and I could go over it, where the military has cracked down and the cross-border activity has declined. So they can do it, and we should insist that they do it.
Raza, but I'd like to ask Dr. Anderson that when we talk about closing down the porous border, I do understand that. But at the same time, when an operation is launched here in Pakistan, the border posts across in Afghanistan, which are manned by the United States, are removed. So why does Pakistan solely share this burden of crossing the cross-border activity? Isn't Afghanistan and, of course, the United States based there equally responsible?
Yeah, can I start?
Quickly, and then we'll get to
that's a fair question, and the three countries, in fact, as you know, do talk about joint military approaches to issues, and they can address this issue. It's a fair one. But here again, if I'm going to put a focus on where the real problem is on the Pakistan side. That's where the safe havens are, and we shouldn't forget that. That is the real issue.
Josh, last 30 seconds.
Yeah, and I'd kind of like to follow up on that, in that whenever relations between the United States and Pakistan break down, or whenever there's a rough patch between Afghanistan and Pakistan and they close border crossings for NATO supplies, that's when you see supplies start to go up in smoke, and that's when you see an uptake in attack on convoys, that's when you see an uptake in attack on cross-border reports. So I think the notion that the Pakistani military establishment has no role to play in the insurgency is absurd. It's completely at odds with the facts that we know.
Thanks so much, both of you, for joining us. We are leaving on an interesting note. We'll get our guests in Islamabad and in Pakistan to respond to that. But from here in Washington, it's good night for now.
Let's cross over to Islamabad. Simple, I'd like to ask you that once again we hear this rhetoric coming in from the United States that Pakistan needs to do more, Pakistan needs to clamp down on the safe havens that are based inside Pakistan. Isn't that an unfair assessment of the situation? Isn't the United States equally responsible?
Maria, I think we've heard enough of this narrative for the past 10 years, but all we've seen, I think the new latest UN report that's just come out, says the violence and violent incidents down south where the surge has taken place have increased 40%. The military operations, the military strategies have failed. And if I take you back to General Stanley McChrystal, when he came out with the most comprehensive report on the Afghan insurgency. In his report, I wish I'd brought a copy and showed it to you, he has said clearly that only 20% of the insurgency, we can say under their own sources, is now based in Afghanistan. 80% of the Taliban, 80% of the insurgency is stemming out from inside Afghanistan. But of course, obviously, you know, there's a lot of failure. And just a comment on Joshua's great take on the Afghan war. I think his opinion about the division between the political war and the military war is absolutely almost as confused as the US strategy in Afghanistan. The fact is that the military strategy is completely failing, and we are continuously hearing the same old narrative. The reconciliation process, the idea about reconciliation was not brought to the table by Pakistan. It was President Obama on his December 2009 speech. This was something that came out of the US itself. So once when you're talking about reconciliation, and on top of that, then there is this whole talk about the Taliban and Pakistan supporting the Taliban. If, you know, if they were not reconcilable, then who are you going to talk to?
Right, Simple,
so, it's the same old narrative. There's nothing new in that.
Right, we've heard this rhetoric many times, and you know, we can go around in circles and play the blame game. But what's the way forward? How do we move forward from the situation that we have at hand?
Maria, frankly, I think we are in the election, in the US election year. This year, probably you will not see any great kind of a change of policy or any landmark change in Afghanistan. I do not think in the election year, US presidential candidate, President Obama, the incumbent candidate, can afford any kind of a disruption in Afghanistan. The problems with, there's going to be the same rhetoric, there is going to be the same blame game.
Sybil, I'm afraid I'll have to cut you short. I do apologize for that. We are running out of time. And I'd just like to end on the note that, you know, we see this rhetoric coming out of the United States time and time again. Pakistan needs to do more. We can go around in circles, play the blame game, but that is not the way forward. Clearly, the military solution in Afghanistan is failing, and a plan B or a reconciliation process, as many are advocating, is absolutely necessary for a stable situation and a stable region. Maria Zulfiqar signing out for tonight.